Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Hilton Caron, who's the CEO of iFabric, and Giancarlo Beavis, who's the CEO of the Intelligent Fabric Division. iFabric is listed on the TSX with the ticker IFA and on the OTC with the ticker IFABF. It's focused on developing a range of products that can improve the safety and well-being of the wearer across a range of market segments, including healthcare, sports and athletic wear, military, and house and home, to name a few. iFabric is a patent-pending chemical solution which has been tested and demonstrated by a third party to kill 99.9% of COVID-19 within 10 minutes. Last week, the company put out an update on business initiatives, which we'll discuss today. We'll open up the conversation to Q&A as well, so if you have any questions, you can input them into the questions in the Q&A box below. So thanks, Hilton and Giancarlo, for being here. Congratulations on the update last week. Obviously, a lot of news, mostly good news. Yeah, it's really exciting, and I know you guys have been ramping up pretty quickly, so I'm excited to hear about the update.
Thanks, Dina. Appreciate it, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I think that what we're going to use this opportunity to do is to allow investors and potential investors to question, anything they have with relation to where we are of late. I think we put out an update to try and really bring the highlights to point of the main taking points that we've achieved of late. And we're welcoming any questions, comments, opinions, and please feel free to go ahead and give us any questions they would like.
So why don't we start with Under Armour? You put an update. Initially, when you went out with Under Armour, you were in one SKU. Now you've moved to 6 different colors on the sports masks, I believe, and are launching with winter gaiters. Can you talk a little bit about how things are ramping up with Under Armour, where you expect things to be, and how quickly they're reordering with you?
Yeah, I think I can take this one. I mean, from Under Armour, we started with the idea from actually Kevin Plank, the founder of Under Armour himself. The sport mask was his baby, and thought that we'd give it a try, put it out there, and see how many units would generate interest. And as you've seen in the media that's been released, it sold out in under an hour in the US. It sold out in 15 minutes in the UK and Europe, and it's really been well received by a lot of people. So originally it was offered in black only. We've now gone into 6 different colorways. They've taken the form of the sports mask itself and added it to a half gaiter and a full gaiter for winter, and just for some more comforting. Some more comfortable ways of wearing the specific mask, and it's been a phenomenal program for us. We've had probably about 3 or 4 different reorders at this point, with another reorder coming in the next, I would say, 30 days. And then we've been looking at using the antiviral formula for some other programs as well, from apparel and things of that nature, and some other accessories. And then also the combination of the antiviral formulation with perhaps some dream skin technology that could be used for gaiters and face masks, because they're such close proximity to the face.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think maskne is a new term that we hadn't really heard before COVID, but we've talked about Protex 2 a lot, haven't really spent too much time on dream skin. So maybe we can talk about, or Giancarlo, you can tell us about dream skin and the benefits of using that in masks and other products.
Yeah, sure. So DreamSkin is a proprietary polymer that was originally developed for people with eczema, dermatitis, and other kind of skin conditions. It was an alternative to your typical topical steroids and other kinds of ointments to help people who suffer from those conditions. And what it does is it keeps your skin in the perfect environment to allow it to heal itself and repair itself, while keeping it moist when it needs to be moist, and while wicking moisture away when you need to have a little bit of a drier environment. And so in the past, we've done a whole host of work around DreamSkin as it relates to undergarments and things like that for people who suffer from this, but also in wound care when we combine it with Protex 2 to help keep bacteria away from the wound and have DreamSkin do its work and help heal the wound slightly faster. And so we're working on that in that environment, but bringing that into the athleisure and sportswear market, we've done a lot of experimental work with DreamSkin and how it relates to tight-fitting garments and accessories, and how it can prevent chafing and things of that nature. So as COVID came out, and as you mentioned it, maskne started to rear its ugly head. we decided that obviously Protex 2 in your mask is going to help keep the bacteria that causes acne and things like that away. And DreamSkin will just give you that soothing and moisturizing sensation to keep your skin in the best environment to hopefully prevent maskne.
So how did that conversation start with Under Armour, and have they done their own testing with DreamSkin?
Yeah, actually, they were looking at a different technology from a different company, and it just came about in a conversation we were having about planning production. And I said, "Well, guys, that sounds like it sounds like an interesting technology, but we have DreamSkin, which you guys looked at for sports bras and tights many years ago, obviously under a different innovation chief." And I said, "Why don't you have a look at the data that we did from that?" And obviously, it panned out that it performed a little bit better than the other technology they were looking at. And so we've kind of gone into full R&D mode to see how it would look like on a mask and gaiter program.
And would you use the same amount of solution for DreamSkin as you would for Protex 2?
DreamSkin has a slightly higher dosage, just the nature of the chemistry itself. So you'd use more chemistry on it, but yeah, still very economical and achievable for an accessory like a mask.
And DreamSkin is technically classified as a medical device in Europe, is that correct?
In the UK, it's classified as a Class 1 medical device, and actually in Canada, we used to have a Class 1 medical device for it as well. We removed it, and we're thinking about doing it again, just because at the time we were doing it on like an undergarment. Wasn't really, wasn't really the way to go. We'll look at doing it on some wound care stuff in Canada, and it'll become Class 1 and Class 2 medical devices in the future.
That's great. Yeah, so obviously things are ramping up pretty quickly with Under Armour, and now you mentioned in the corporate update that you signed another big box retailer. So can you tell us about how this is expected to ramp up, and how did the size of that compare to the Under Armour orders?
So it's a national big box retailer in Canada, probably the largest one here. And we started discussing with them, obviously, the success of the Under Armour mask, and they wanted to kind of have a similar program. We were doing a gaiter program, which was the first one to launch, actually shipped about 2 weeks ago. It should be in store within the next 2 weeks under their own private label. And then we did a mask program that I believe is supposed to ship from us around December. So it'll be in stores around January. And really what it is getting a back to the gym, getting back to life kind of 2-pack, where it'll combine a sport mask version as well as a performance apparel t-shirt. That's also treated with Protex 2 AV.
That's great. And then on top of that, you're launching your own private label. So what's the status of the private label launch? How is that expected to ramp up?
Sure. So there's 2 of those launches coming. The frontline personal protective wear. We're in the final throes of production, so we would expect goods to be on the water in the next week or 2. So it will still launch around the end of the year as we predicted, with a 3-ply treated mask, a KN95 treated mask, a reusable textile mask in 2 different incarnations, one more of a sport mask, one more of a regular everyday use kind of mask. So those are all underway. And we also did an isolation gown that's treated with the Protex 2 AV. I think initially we'll sell them on our IFTNA website, as well as going through some of the distributors, medical device distributors in Canada, for the masks and things of that nature, because that's just the typical channel. And everything seems to be on track for late end of the year launch, but we're getting there closer and closer every day.
And you had guided kind of around 5 million target sales for the first year for private label. Is that still something that you'd be looking at?
Yeah, I think that we'd still be on track with that. The medical distributor is looking at big volume size orders, so we're not going to be relying just on our web-based sales. Those are kind of the big volume drivers for now. And once we get the first initial runs in, we'll look to expand that with some more distributors into the US and things of that nature. So I'm pretty comfortable with that, with those numbers.
Okay, great. And what about some of the other opportunities in the pipeline? I know there's other opportunities within Protex 2 with the laundry additive, potential for hard surface sprays. You've been in discussions with airlines and a number of different industries. Can you give us an overview of how things are shaping up on that front?
Yeah, there's a couple things that have started to come to fruition. Obviously, unfortunately, we can't speak about a lot of the things that haven't been released publicly at this point. But the testing has shown great residual kill for bacteria. Now we're moved on to viral testing on the hard surface, or all surface coating, as we call it. So we've seen some fantastic preliminary efficacy. So we'll continue down that path. We still have the open option to do the Toronto Blue Jays spring training facility in Dunedin, which was tentatively agreed to, as well as some other properties in the city. for office buildings and other public places. So we'll look to continue that as we go down the road with this testing. And then the hard surface disinfectant from an actual spray use. I would hope that we can have a launch on that probably the beginning of the year is the more realistic timeline for that, in which we would add to the frontline program that we'd do it under that private or under that owned brand. So yeah, that's those things are coming along nicely. We have some other items like our durable water repellent, which is a C0 water repellent treatment that we were still vying for a very prominent brand to be the specified chemistry. We just finished some trials up in Guatemala about a week ago. Everything's going exactly as we suspected, actually better than we suspected. So that one looks like that's going to come to fruition as well.
And that you'd been targeting sort of year end as well for the water repellent.
The results would be by year of end, and then the programs would likely start sometime mid next year, I would guess.
Okay, that's great. And then some of the questions from the audience, we've talked about this in the past, but obviously there are competitors in this space. Can you touch on what the difference is between your technology and competing technologies? I think Polygiene is probably the best or most well-known public company. There's certainly differences in iFabric's Protex 2 technology and what Polygiene is doing and some of the other privates.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the other biggest technology out there are heavy metals, whether that be silver or copper. Polygiene in particular is a silver product. I mean, it's in silver in textiles is not an effective antimicrobial. Silver to be antimicrobial must be fully hydrated. So unless you're walking around in a soaking wet mask or a soaking wet gym t-shirt or a soaking wet scrub, you're not getting full efficacy noticed from an antimicrobial. Sure, in your gym shirt, if you're sweating under your armpits, you're going to have some excess moisture. That'll give you some kind of efficacy, but the majority of your person is not going to be protected. Whereas Protex 2 uses the moisture from ambient air and doesn't require anything additional to be active. It's just there. It's protocol free. You're protected by putting the shirt on and walking around the whole day. So that's the key difference, obviously. And then the speed at which it kills. So I've seen some of the Polygiene reports and some of these other guys put out reports on effective against coronavirus. They test against human coronavirus, not COVID-19, two very different viruses. COVID-19 lasts longer on surfaces. COVID-19 replicates at a much quicker rate. It's a much more new and unknown virus as opposed to human coronavirus, which is nothing more than the common cold. Then they have come out with some tests that show they have tested against SARS-CoV-2, but what you'll notice is they test against an ISO 18184 method, which is an international standard, or sorry, European standard, not usually accepted by regulatory bodies in North America. So they wouldn't be able to get any kind of kill claim registered with those results at all. And the reason for that is that method is very sponsor defined, meaning that I'm the sponsor. I can put 10, I can put 10 CFUs of bacteria on a fabric and kill 9.9 of them and start claiming that I have 99.9% efficacy. Whereas the test method we use is an AATCC 100. It's the test method that the US EPA uses to regulate biocides. And that's the reason why we use it. It's more stringent. By the nature of the protocol itself, you have to use 10 to 100 times what you would expect to inoculum of what you'd expect to find in the real world. And we used 100 times. And then you'll look at their time points, and they've tested at 2 hours. Some people, some people have said 30 minutes. Well, we're still faster than all of that. We kill it in under 10 minutes, and we have residual kill for 1, 6, and 24 hours, which is something that they haven't been able to claim. And typically with viruses, when you see these other companies out there with a kill claim of 2 hours, well, for people who know anything about viruses, they start to degrade after 2 hours. So it's not necessarily the technology that's doing anything. It's the nature of the virus itself that's starting to degrade and die off on its own. From what I've read and seen from everyone else, we're the only people claiming in 10 minutes, and we're the only ones who have the test data to back it up exactly against COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2.
What about some of the airlines who have signed deals with for spraying down the planes? Is that a similar situation, or are they using different technology?
Yeah, so most of those sprays are quaternary ammonium compounds, which are just typical disinfectants that are around for many, many years. Some of them have found some durability that can last up to 7 days, but ongoing, that's not going to be realistic. People aren't going to do that. Our airlines aren't going to do that. There was one where it was a Texas-based company who had a deal with a Texas-based airline to do a couple planes. I mean, they had one press release and it's kind of worn away at this point. Everything that you see from industry is that they can't keep up with these kind of cleaning protocols that they have in place. It's just not a realistic thing to go forward with forever. So what ours is a durable coating that can last 6 to 12 months. That makes that kind of active surface there without having to spray down every time you stop the plane. So that's the biggest difference for us.
Okay. So there's a question from the audience. You signed a couple of licensing agreements in Africa most recently, and also South Korea. Can you give us an update on the agreement in South Korea and how things are going in Africa as well?
Yeah, so in South Korea, they've started a program with some dental masks for the South Korean domestic market. They just finished their first production run, so I imagine that those will start to flood into the market very shortly. And they've also made some headway in the air filter space that they're working on, and they're working with the actual South Korean government for uniforms and things of that nature. Excuse me. And then we have some athleisure brands that are pretty much domestically for the Korean market as well, that are looking at this and all kinds of things from masks to t-shirts to everything else. And then the Africa agreement we signed, they're doing their trials right now. Obviously, they need to take our chemistry, put it into their supply chain, and get that going. So that's kind of the stage we're at right now with them. We've delivered the donation that we made to the clinic of the AV Guard, and we're just delivering some initial orders for them to start doing their trialing right now.
And going back to South Korea, one of the questions from the audience was, are there any marketing claims or advocacy groups that can be levered from this market?
So in certain Asian jurisdictions, you can make a little bit more of aggressive claims than you can in North America. So to be honest, in the domestic South Korean market, we're leaving the regulatory landscape to them. Not necessarily to us, but if they are granted something that's of value, we would certainly leverage that with the EPA and Health Canada and anyone else. Not sure that we'll need it. I think that the data that we've submitted to the EPA for our kill claims is above and beyond what they ever asked for. So I'm not sure that we would ever need to leverage that. But if there was something interesting, we would certainly do so.
Okay. And can you give an update on government relation activities, if the Canadian government is aware of the technology, and can you speak to any inroads in the last few months in this area?
Yeah, well, the Canadian government's certainly aware of it, that's for sure. Whether they act on that is something else. We've been in discussions with an innovation minister from day one when COVID started. We've been in communication with a whole host of other people within the procurement area of Health Canada. And they don't really seem to know how to handle a product like ours that can kill what we can kill on textiles. So we're working with them. It's in the process, but we're really just trying to find the best and fastest route to complete registration within Health Canada that we can find, kind of working with them to find that route. Similar to what we would have done with the EPA 6 years ago when we were the first company to go to them and ask to make a kill claim on a bacterial kill claim on a garment. Health Canada has never really given anything like that before. And we actually just filled out a RFP for Health Canada for antiviral treatments for masks. So that was as of last week. So we'll see how that goes out.
So how's the advanced kill claim status going in the US? Where are you guys, what kind of discussions are you having now? Obviously, you've been going back and forth on this and still waiting for the final kill claim.
Yeah, really at this point, we're kind of negotiating what that final label will look like and what those final claims might be from a verbiage and the semantics perspective. So it's kind of a back and forth, which is great because at least, you know, the EPA is in those final throes of what we're doing. So that's kind of the status right now. We have some more calls set up with them to try and narrow that down and land on something we can both agree on.
And just to reiterate, I think we've talked about this in the past, but the kill claim, you guys helped write the protocol for this. So this is not something that is a complete wild card. You have a lot of confidence in getting it. It's more the uncertainty of timing.
Really, exactly. Yeah, it's just in their process. Again, like I had mentioned, it's something that they didn't know how to handle. So we kind of worked with them to guide them on a protocol methodology at least, and then they told us what they wanted, what we had to achieve to get that, and we achieved it. So really now it's just making sure that we don't overstep as a claim, and that they're not allowing us to make claims that that aren't proven, which we're not really asking for. So we don't see any issue with it. It's just a timing thing at this point.
Okay. And in the press release that came out last week, there was a bit of a supplier dispute that you guys have been working through, but could end up being a positive for the company as well as the end customer is going through another supplier. Can you give color to who the customer is more broadly speaking, but also what the status of that dispute is?
Yeah, I don't know that we'll mention names of the client just for obvious reasons, but the specific client has agreed and is still paying us for the product, which we were able to source from another source at better margins. So at the end of the day, that's a better sale for us. And listen, it's the unfortunate part of business. Every once in a while, you have to get into a lawsuit with somebody, and we have all faith in our lawyers over in China. They're very capable. And we're just going through the process. And at the end of the day, we could have the sales of the mask at better margins and still recover all the money. So at this point, that's kind of where we're at.
And what about the timing of delivery of that product?
Of the new masks, we're starting the first delivery is going to happen within 2 weeks. It's going into 3 separate deliveries. So 1 in November, 1 in December. Sorry, 2 in November, 1 in December.
Okay. I think that's a good summary. Can you talk about maybe some of the other catalysts kind of in the near term, what we should be looking for from iFabric in the next few months? Obviously, there's a lot going on, so.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I mean, our medical customers have gone through the last few months of doing trials and getting this onto the new lines that they want to launch from a scrub and lab coat perspective. So we're just kind of finalizing testing there to make sure everything goes the way we want to. The AV Guard program with the laundry additive. We're looking at doing it ourselves to launch on our website, as well as doing it through our medical customer under their own private label brand, potentially starting that in Europe as early as first quarter next year. So there's a lot of that kind of thing going on, as well as with our private label finished product apparel. We've re-signed key agreements, key programs, where they're just continuing from where we were last year at an expanded level, with about 4 or 5 different ones. And then we've got some new programs on the horizon in new categories with those same big box retailers as well. The initial response to the mask tee program that we kind of discussed right off the bat, we got an initial order, and we're in the midst of negotiating a follow-up order before they even take delivery of our first shipment. So all is well on that front.
And there's a question from the audience if any hotel chains are expressing interest in your products.
So we've done some work in the past through one of our customers called Delos, which is a health and wellness standard company. And we've had discussions with Marriott as a hotel chain in the past, and we continue those discussions now. I think that through Delos, we have a very good inroad on that, because they used to do MGM Grand rooms that were well certified, which was their certification, that used DreamSkin and Protex 2 treated products in them. So we're going to look to expand that in the MGM group of properties, as well as look what we can do for Marriott.
Okay, and let's talk about the share price for a second. Obviously, it's pulled back a little bit, but there's a question about of why the share price is dropping. I think liquidity is an issue, but Hilton and insiders own 75% of the company, so obviously it doesn't really take much to move the stock, and I would say that news flow has been relatively light despite all of the corporate developments. I think last week's press release really gave investors a lot more color on what activity has been going on, and that things are going really well. So maybe you can just address that quickly.
I think, as you say, liquidity is always going to be one of those things where a few trades can really make it go up or down, as we've seen in the history of the stock. But as we focus on running the business and getting these new programs, I mean, that's our key focus, is to make sure that we run the business the best way we can, so that share price does get to where we believe it could be. Obviously, the EPA weighs heavily on the stock price as well. I think as soon as we see that EPA registration come through, that it will open the floodgates on the stock price in itself. And listen, the stock price where it's at will allow us to be opportunistic if and when we decide to ever go and do anything. it gives us some great opportunity and great flexibility. Hilton, anything to add on that side?
No, but I think on the business side, I think the most exciting thing is that we continue to have market leaders in a variety of segments reaching out to us at very senior levels. And we've had multiple conversations. So these are things boding well into 2021, where global market leaders in transportation and other segments have heard about us. And we certainly are a game changer in the space that we have pioneered. So I think that will only bode well for the business. And I think when 2021 comes around, despite a pandemic year, when we bring out our financials at the end of the year to see how our company has performed financially and what we've been able to achieve in despite the environment we're in, I'm beyond proud of what we've been able to achieve and what we've got going into the future. And I think that is going to bode very well for our investors.
Yeah, so speaking of financials, you put out the June 30th quarter a few months ago. Obviously, that was exponentially larger than the quarter previously in the IFNA division, and things seem to be ramping up still. September 30th is the year end. So when would you be expecting to put out year end results?
Q4, which will come out around the same time that we do our full financial year. So usually it comes out second, third week in December.
And in terms of the sales cycle that you're seeing with some of these companies, are you seeing this process speed up at all?
Retailers and brands are being as fluid as humanly possible. Yes, and the negotiation with a big box retailer, even on this mask tea program, and they have a conversation on a Thursday and they want you to confirm delivery on a Monday. So people are trying to speed things up for sure. And the good news is the lack of buying over the last 6 months has given some fluidity in Asia and other producing markets. So we're able to achieve some of these things on a quicker time frame. But yeah, for sure, people are trying to be more nimble. They're trying to shorten cycles. However, that being said, they are still planning for when this is over. And at that point, I mean, we're starting to plan spring 22 right now with some brands.
One point I just want to bring up, a lot of times John Carlo and I get questioned about sourcing from China and this notion that you can flick a switch and get sourcing from other parts of the world. I think it's important for us to know that we're running a business and that we can't, while we are always, despite a pandemic or despite what's going on, we're always looking to source more efficiently. But the fact is that even if we did go to Bangladesh, to Sri Lanka, if we go to Vietnam, all these other countries, the raw materials come from China. The laws state that there's still your duty is still based on where the raw materials come from. We don't have the luxury of flying 10 times a year to go and validate new factories. So while we have ramped up quite significantly with people that can move around Asia on our behalf to look at other countries for additional sourcing opportunities, this is not something that we can just do on a whim, and we're really trying to do it efficiently and responsibly. So it really has come up quite often, and I think this notion that we're not going to be seen made in China is just that. I think that it's the world we live in. For us to put factories in places where labor is competitive would take years to put into place. So we have to be realistic and hold the wheel as we grow this business and we look for efficiencies.
And what about the payment cycle? So this big box retailer you're launching with them, how quickly is that going from contract stage to generating revenue and being on your balance?
They've actually brought out a rather helpful payment system, and we haven't had to use it. Our cash flow doesn't require it at this point in the game. But as we're growing so exponentially with them, they're able to give rather competitive additional discount to pay us. They could pay us in 7 days from invoice. So, it's something that we will you know, as needed. It's just nice to have that additional help. They're usually a 45-day credit payment. They pay like clockwork. We're not worried about credit with them. And so it really is, it's nice to have that they've brought out this additional help to their key suppliers. And we certainly, you know, have that additional tool to keep cash flow on a real steady basis.
Yeah. And there's a question from the audience if there's a benefit to partner with a multinational to leverage their production relationships and market penetration.
Always the case. We will always look at key strategists who've got market share, and we will definitely, it's been a strategy we've used almost from day one, and we will continue to look for those market leaders that also appreciate what we bring to the table for them to grow our business and theirs together.
And what about, we touched on licensing a little bit. Are you working on any other licensing deals now?
There was something else that we looked at, and we will continue as a strategy to look at additional licenses. I think that there's just so much growth within what we have right now that we need to just keep a focus on who we've got going right now. As I said, we've got some really big multinationals in new segments who've reached out to us. That's going to take a little bit of work. We really have the preponderance done. So each new project we get seems to be a quicker process from initial conversation to getting them up to speed with commercial opportunities. So really exciting new developments that hopefully come to fruition that we'll be able to make some announcements.
Just going back to the EPA claims, there's a question from the audience about how big the gap is between what you want to say in the kill claim and what the EPA is proposing.
It's not that far off. It really isn't that far off at all. We've actually, what we've negotiated with them is almost identical to what we want to say. There's just certain technicalities that, as Giancarlo alluded to a little earlier, this is an area that they've never dealt in before, and one has to a degree, educate them and explain to them what we're achieving and what we're bringing to the table. So, to a degree, it's not a matter of what they want to give us, and we haven't really changed our claim at all. It's just finding the language that they are going to be comfortable with to give to us, and we should be done.
And obviously this big box retailer has moved ahead and moved forward without this advanced kill claim. Are they betting that you will get this claim, or do they believe in the technology on its own and don't really care about the kill claim?
They believe in the technology as it stands today, because it's going to be on the shelf right, almost immediately, right? So I'm sure, don't get me wrong, they're obviously interested in the future to use that claim, but they weren't going to wait because they saw the value of the product and they saw the quality of the actual product we're making. So they went ahead either way.
Yeah, that's great. So there's no more questions from the audience. If anyone has a question, you can still input it or email me at tina@adcap.ca, and then I'll make sure that management is able to get your questions. But I think that was a really good overview. I think the update last week was great. Gave us a bit of color into how things are going operationally, and also just knowing that you're moving in the right direction and moving forward on a number of initiatives. So congratulations on the success so far, and looking forward to getting more updates in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good one.
All right, guys. Take care.